Well, American food companies are poisoning us, and our next guest is on a crusade to stop them from doing that. Vani Hari is also known as the Food Babe. She's not only written 4 books, she's testified before Congress in a blistering takedown of the processed food industry. Watch her here destroy what used to be one of my favorite drinks, the pumpkin spice latte from Starbucks. Watch.
For years, Starbucks didn't publish their ingredients for their coffee drinks. It was a mystery until I convinced a barista to show me the ingredients on the back of the bottles they were using to make menu items like their famous pumpkin spice lattes. I found out here in the United States, Starbucks was coloring their PSLs with caramel coloring level 4, an ingredient made from ammonia and linked to cancer, but using beta-carotene from carrots to color their drinks in the UK. After publishing an investigation and widespread media attention, Starbucks removed caramel coloring from all of their drinks in America and started publishing the ingredients for their entire menu.
And Vani Hari joins me now. Nice to see you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Clayton.
It was a rite of passage in the fall to look forward to the pumpkin spice latte. But then after having lived abroad for a number of years and experiencing the differences between these chemicals, coming back to the U.S. and be able to drink that drink, never again. So I had to play that soundbite. It was a pretty funny moment. What kind of blowback did you get from Starbucks after that testimony?
Yeah, so Starbucks actually removed caramel coloring level 4, which is an ammonia-based dye that they heat with sulfites, and that's linked to cancer. So after I wrote about the what was actually in a pumpkin spice latte, because for so many years, Starbucks actually hid that information from the public. When you would call them, you would email them, you would ask a barista for the ingredient label, they would never give it to you. Eventually, I convinced a barista to show me the different bottles that they were using to create the concoction of a pumpkin spice latte, and was able to take photographs of that and put together my own ingredient list. And then on my blog, foodbabe.com, I revealed what was actually in a pumpkin spice latte. And that post went so viral that the news caught on. I was on all the morning shows, and eventually Starbucks removed caramel color level 4. However, the pumpkin spice latte today is still far from perfect. It's got, I think a grande has over 56 grams of sugar. It's got all kinds of additives and preservatives in it that you wouldn't want to consume on a daily basis. It's got different emulsifiers that destroy the gut bacteria. So this is something that we don't want to be consuming. But as the American public, we have the right to know the ingredients in our food. And so after that campaign, thankfully, Starbucks started revealing everything in their Starbucks, drinks and their lattes and frappuccinos, et cetera, on their website. So it was a huge win for the Food Babe Army.
I mean, now I'm just drinking some black coffee. So yeah, you've
That's
turned the tide. I wanted to start with that anecdote because I think it's emblematic of the food industry at large. You can pick Starbucks out of a hat. You can pick any of them, frankly. And you've been on this crusade. What inspired you to start your journey as the Food Babe and advocate for transparency in the food industry?
My parents came here in the 1960s. They were immigrants from India. My dad had been here for a few years before he got an arranged marriage to my mother. And when they were in India getting married, he says, we're going to go on our honeymoon back to America. And she actually never went back to her house. She was whisked away to live in America for the first time. And, as people know about Indian culture, the cow is kind of sacred, right? And so she had never had a hamburger before, but the first thing my dad introduced her to was a McDonald's hamburger. And he says, if we're going to be in America, we're going to eat like Americans. And so that's how I was raised, on a processed fast food diet. And as a result, I was in and out of doctor's offices for most of my life. I was on 9 prescription drugs and hit rock bottom in my early 20s, where I ended up in the hospital and getting my appendix taken out. And it was that moment that I decided to take health seriously and determine what I could do to solve my health issues. And what I did was I used these skills that I learned in high school, where I was a top tier debater. I was number 1 in state 3 years in a row, recruited to college to be in debate. And back then we didn't have Google. So you had to actually go to the library, look at huge law journals, look at the microfiche, go to the photocopier and photocopy all your evidence and take it into debate rounds in these big tubs. And so I treated my health the same way. I started to check out books, huge books on nutrition and what really I should be eating. And there was this term that I learned that just hit me over the head. And that was that the majority of foods at the grocery store are dead. And that's actually how I felt for most of my life, dead, zombie-like. And it wasn't until I realized that I needed to eat whole, real foods to heal my body that I was able to eventually get off all 9 prescription drugs and realize a level of health that I never thought was possible. I used to have eczema on my face and my body that went away. It disappeared. I started to feel this type of energy that I never felt before. And it was so apparent that my friends and my family and everyone around me that I grew up with here in Charlotte, North Carolina, were like, what are you doing? You look so different. We want a piece of what you're doing, right? What is this new green drink you're drinking? Like, what is all this stuff wait a minute, why aren't you eating candy anymore? I thought you were the candy queen. And so I started foodbabe.com. I wanted to call it eathealthyliveforever.com initially, but my husband, who's the tech geek in the family, said that was a terrible name. And he bought Food Babe off auction for $10 and said, how about Food Babe? And I said, well, I didn't feel like a food babe for most of my life, right? But why don't I teach other people to become a food babe? And so we named the blog Food Babe. And for the first year and a half of the blog, I even never had my photo on the blog. It was really kind of hiding behind this monk here because I was working in the corporate world, working for Big Six consulting firm and, consulting with these C-level executives at the biggest banks in the world. And it was a really, high profile, fast paced job, but I had this passion for putting my health first. And everyone around me at work really knew that was me. They knew I was kind of a health freak at work, but they didn't know that I had this blog necessarily. And so I kind of hid it as much as I could, but certain people eventually found out. And it was when I would say Chick-fil-A invited me to their headquarters after an article I had written called Chemical Filet or Chick-fil-A had gone viral. They decided to reach out to me, ask me to come to the headquarters and talk to them about changing their ingredients and menu items. And when they did that, it was the signal that my consulting days at the bank should end and I should be taking on the food industry full time. And at first, it was a really tough decision because I was not making a dime doing Food Babe. It was a pure passion project. I just wanted to tell people the truth about what was really in their food. At that time, there was close to 100 ingredients in a Chick-fil-A chicken sandwich. The second ingredient is MSG, and all kinds of additives that you should not be eating. And I had been eating Chick-fil-A for most of my life, thinking it was a healthier alternative to McDonald's and other fast food. But when you looked at the ingredients side by side to any of the other fast food companies, it was basically the same stuff. And when I revealed kind of this information and then was able to go to their headquarters and make some meaningful changes at that company, I knew I had a bigger calling. And so I quit my job cold turkey. And the first thing that I had time to research, which had been, making me confused most of my life when, I love to travel and I traveled a lot for my job. And so whenever I'd go to Europe, I'd always feel better when I ate their food. And it was cleaner. It was more fresh. It tasted better. There were so many stark differences. And so the first investigation I did was looking at American packaged products and how they differ from the European counterparts. And what I found was shocking. I found that American companies are using toxic and poisonous ingredients that are banned or heavily regulated in other countries. One of the first examples I looked at, which has now changed, was Quaker Oats. Quaker Oats here in America, the strawberry version was a little apple dried pieces dyed with petroleum coal tar artificial food dye red 40. Whereas in Europe, they were using real strawberries in the strawberry flavored oatmeal. And
they're not even using real strawberries. It's apples. It's apples covered in dye.
Yes, because it's cheaper to use apples covered in dye. And that dye, unfortunately, is, if you use it in Europe, back in 2010, they enacted a warning label, a cigarette type warning label on a product that says may cause adverse effects on activity and attention in children. And so the American food companies said, hey, we don't want that cigarette type warning label on our products. We would rather voluntarily remove the dyes and use, fruit juices and other natural sources instead of the petroleum coal tar dyes. And we're going to reformulate our products across the board. And this was every major food company, by the way. PepsiCo, Coca-Cola, General Mills, Kellogg's, Kraft Heinz, all of them did this, right? It is very rare to see an artificial food dye in American product that's purposely there in Europe. They figured out how to reformulate their products. And so when I found this out, it was disturbing and it was maddening. And I said, now I can do something about it. And so I took on one of the most starkest examples that I revealed in that initial investigation, which was Kraft macaroni and cheese. Kraft here in the United States had yellow 5 and yellow 6. In Europe, they were using paprika and beta carotene. And this was something that every child in America had virtually, eats, right, and has had or
grown up on it,
schools or at a fast food menu at a restaurant. And so this was one of the examples that I wanted to use because this was targeting little children. And this is, obviously the artificial food dyes impact little children's brains. And so I took on Kraft macaroni and cheese. We gathered over 386,000 signatures on a petition. I took 270 of those to the headquarters on April 1st, 2013. Actually 2013. And they told me to basically, you have to disagree, but they let me in. It was nice. They let me in. I was met there by a few supporters. Some camera crews came, and they basically said, we have to agree to disagree. And so I left there, but I didn't stop. I kept using my platform to educate the public about this issue of artificial food dyes. And slowly but surely, we were able to shift the marketplace from people buying Kraft to Annie's, their competitor, who was not using artificial food dyes. And then Annie's got bought up by General Mills for $800 million. And when that happened, they had no choice to change. And within 6 months of that or so, they ended up changing. And it was hilarious because they're like, it had nothing to do with the petition or the campaign. It just had to do with consumer preference, which was really funny. But of course, consumers don't want to poison their kids if they don't have to. And so this was something that, again, now over 10 years ago, I was taking on. And this was the basis for most of my campaigns for the next several years. In all over the world, China, India, Europe, Singapore, Subway was using a chemical called azodicarbonamide. This chemical is used in yoga mats and shoe rubber. And if you turn a yoga mat sideways, you see evenly dispersed air bubbles in that yoga mat. Well, this is the same chemical that does that in bread so that it doesn't have those big pockets and hole pockets. So every time you would go to a Subway or any fast food company for that matter, you would get the most uniform piece of bread and it wouldn't have those naturally occurring air pockets. So this is something that Subway was using here in the United States because our FDA allowed it, but they were not using it in all those other countries. And so I wanted to take them on because Michelle Obama, during the Let's Move campaign, partnered with Subway, saying Subway is safe for all kids. And when I looked at the ingredients of what's in a typical Subway sandwich, I was horrified. There's close to 50 ingredients just in bread alone. Not to mention they used to have and not to mention they used to have all kinds of artificial food dyes and preservatives and other chemicals that should not be in the human diet, period. And
well, I mean, can I just say, I was going to say, can I just say, as a person who's made my own bread from time to time, I mean, right, there should be 3 ingredients in it, like flour, what, yeast and salt? Like that should be it, not 50 ingredients. Am I wrong?
Yeah. And it's there for a preservation reason. It's there from um, a making money standpoint. You know, if you make
Right.
bread with less real ingredients, it's going to cost less, and so it's a money making thing. And this is something that, you know, they had this tagline, "Eat fresh," and this is just not eating
Right.
fresh. And to have little children be eating this as part of that program just destroyed me. And so I was like, you know, I was a big fan of what she was doing, or trying to do by, having the organic garden and trying to take on big food. But she was completely co-opted by the special interests in Washington and moved the focus from food over to exercise, which is actually what Coca-Cola funded Harvard scientists to say. And so this was something that was extremely ridden with conflicts of interest. And I wanted to make sure she knew, but also the American public knew what was actually in Subway's bread. And when I took on Subway and I started a petition, within 48 hours, it was 50,000 signatures, and it was going super viral. And it was, on every major news station. And by the end of the week, I had a franchisee owner send me the letter from the CEO of Subway saying that they were going to remove the chemical. And by the end of just a few weeks after that, I was able to work with a bunch of nonprofit organizations like the Environmental Working Group and get azodicarbonamide out of virtually every single bread manufacturer in America. It was absolutely incredible. But this is a chemical, again, that was so hazardous that you got fined $450,000 if you got caught using it in certain countries. And when it's heated, it turns into a carcinogen. And this is something that the FDA allows in our food. To this day, it is still allowed. The FDA still allows azodicarbonamide in our bread, but it was faster to target the company directly to get it removed from our food supply
Than to go to the FDA. I think that brings up the big question, right? I mean, all of these companies are getting away with it because we're allowing it to happen. And the FDA, I mean, it seems, works in cahoots with many of them, former lobbyists and so forth that go to work at the FDA. There's this sort of revolving door of these people who are in this industry. So if we don't have a major change at the FDA or at the, in Washington, D.C., will we ever see a major change? I mean, consumers can do a lot, right? As evidenced by what you've been able to do. But at the end of the day, government really needs to be the one to step in here.
Yes, they do. And for the first time in my career, I actually have hope under Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s leadership and with the people who are going to be put in place underneath him at the FDA, Dr. Marty Makary. I had the opportunity to be at a Senate roundtable with them in Washington recently, where I gave my testimony and they heard my testimony and I heard their testimony. And I think everybody in that room was extremely moved because we spent 4 hours solid, not talking about one partisan politic, right? We talked about how to save humanity, how to save our children, what are the major issues that are plaguing American health and how to solve them. And I was extremely moved by how Dr. Marty Makary gets this issue. He understands food as medicine. He understands the FDA has been asleep at the wheel and has to release the ties from industry. And I think that's the only way that we're going to be able to unravel what's happened year after year, no matter what administration has been in power, is someone that's going to actually go in and say, enough's enough. We're going to take out the funding of the FDA. I mean, close to 50% of the FDA is funded by industry. That's unacceptable. And when Senator Sanders just had a hearing that he questioned the head of the FDA and the head of Human Foods, and it was stark in that. I mean, it was absolutely, I don't know, my mind was blown watching this, the cross-examine of our elected government, our put in place regulatory bodies and who's in charge of them. And, the quote was, "I will not cascade on the food industry and the pharma, companies right now." And Bernie Sanders is like, That's your job to
Right.
hold them accountable, right? And it was just it was so insane. And they admitted that they had not even tested, for example, red number 40 in over a decade. And this has increased astronomically, 500% over the time it's been introduced to our food supplies in terms of how many products it's in. And our poor kids are being decimated with their health, and they're being put on all of these ADHD medications and other medications to control their brains and their behavior, and having mental health issues at such an early age, and no one's looking at these chemicals that are being inundated in our food supply. And then on top of it, they are now recommending a shot for something that to make food less addictive in the human body, when we should be looking at the food companies that are purposely creating ultra processed foods to make them addictive. We should start at the root cause, and we're not doing that. And it's really exciting that we have this new leadership in place that are going to take on these issues. I really do feel that this is our time. It's going to be a new era. This is going to be a time of transparency in the government like we've never had before. And we're going to have almost like, I feel like, a tipping point when it comes to really creating everlasting change and reversing the trends of us being last in terms of health when you compare us to any industrialized nation, and start to increase that trajectory back to our life expectancy of where it should be.
Yeah, now we have shots for weight loss, and all these things, like Ozempic and these other. Now, that industry, of course, is just thriving as a result of this. We're keeping people in this perpetual cycle of, eat these processed foods, and then the big pharmaceutical companies can make all the money on the backside now, on your increased size of your backside. What we've been talking around sort of some of these additives and preservatives and how they affect our health, and you talked about how it personally affected you. Can you maybe kind of go through and explain sort of like maybe the average fast food meal, or what Americans may be eating on a daily basis, and what some of these additives are actually doing to their bodies that they might not even know about?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I would think first, we talked a lot about artificial food dyes. We have food companies like Coca-Cola making Fanta in Europe with real orange juice. Here it's yellow 5 and red 40. It's high fructose corn syrup that's in the Fanta here in the United States. I mean, high fructose corn syrup is one ingredient that has been designed to spike our blood sugar in a way that makes the processed food more palatable. It makes it more addictive. It makes us eat more of it than we should. And so from that perspective, high fructose corn syrup is one ingredient that I avoid at all costs. This is something that is made from genetically engineered corn. That corn is created to withstand heavy doses of Roundup, and glyphosate is the main ingredient in Roundup that causes cancer. It's been implicated in so many different court cases. It's awarded plaintiffs $2.2 billion in jury trials. Actually, the jury trials that were under RFK Jr.'s leadership when he was a lawyer. And it's something that we have to avoid. So first, high fructose corn syrup, any ingredient that's coming from corn or soy is going to be doused with this chemical called Roundup, glyphosate. And this is very problematic. So this is something that you find in soy oil, cottonseed oil. Actually, cottonseed oil is one of the worst oils that you can put in your body, because it's actually not even regulated like a food crop. It's regulated like a textile crop. So they can have many more worse chemicals put on that crop. And cottonseed oil is just a byproduct of the cotton industry that they found out, hey, this is just something we can sell as the food companies can just use it as oil, replace it. But what they found out, it destroys our metabolic system in our body. It turns on our cancer cells. It is something that the way it's produced, the way it's deodorized and extracted with hexane and bleached, it's completely rancid when we get it at the grocery store. So this is something that's, really harmful for human health. So I would avoid soy oil, corn oil, cottonseed oil, canola oil. All of those are likely genetically engineered, and then they have these problematic issues of the way that they're produced and are very and they kind of fall under this label of seed oils. Now, not all seed oils are bad, but these particular ones are extremely bad, and it's something that we should get out of our diet. We should go back to olive oil, grass-fed butter and ghee, coconut oil. All of those type of things would be a much better alternative to cook with. But the problem is, every single time you go out to eat fast food or a processed food, it's in our food because it's being subsidized by the government. And this is where, again, we need to rehaul how we are spending our money in Washington and subsidize regenerative farming so that we can have diverse crops and move away from this corn and soy situation where all of those corn and soy additives and other processed oils are being fed not only to ourselves, but are also being fed to the meat that we eat and make them sick. So it's a very sick system that we've created here in the United States, and it's something we have to change. The other additives I want to mention, and I think this is so important, it might seem like it's okay to have, but the problem is it tricks our brains. It's called natural flavor. And if you remove natural flavor from your diet and you look at anything you buy at the grocery store and you say, you know what, I'm not going to buy anything with the words natural flavor on it, you will avoid 90% of the bad products at the grocery store, artificial flavor or natural flavor. Because under this label, the FDA allows virtually thousands of chemicals that the food industry has created with the best scientists, the tobacco scientists that figured out how to make cigarettes addictive. Well, they've done the same thing for the food industry. And they've done it through these flavoring components that completely hijacked our entire olfactory systems, our taste buds, our brains, to the point where we remember a flavor and we want to consume that. It's the reason why you know the difference between a McDonald's hamburger and a Burger King hamburger and a Wendy's hamburger. It's because of the natural flavors. It's because of this flavoring that they add to hijack your brain into remembering that flavor. And it's the reason why when you make a homemade burger, it's different every time, you know, and you can't really pinpoint the taste. And it's not like it makes your mouth water like it does me when I think about, for example, a Chick-fil-A chicken sandwich because of the MSG they put it in it, which, by the way, natural flavor acts just like MSG. My mouth starts watering. I think about that flavor. I still remember what a Chick-fil-A chicken sandwich tastes like, even though I haven't had one in 15 years. And so this is what the food industry is doing to food. And this is something that's not found in nature. This is made in a chemical laboratory with very sophisticated science and finding the bliss point of our bodies. And so this is why ultra processed food has become so addictive. That combined with the sugar, the salt, and the fat, it's something our bodies can't handle. And if you don't know the truth and tell yourself, you know what, I'm not going to be part of this massive experiment anymore, you're going to end up like the majority of Americans. Right now, we have 38% of preteens ages 12 to 18 having pre-diabetes. It used to be 0. That's unacceptable. It's because of this ultra processed food. It's been weaponized against us, and now we see our health being decimated.
I mean, I've eaten quarter pounders with cheese in Europe, and they don't taste like quarter pounders with cheese at a McDonald's in America. Is that because of this natural flavoring that's added in America, not in Europe?
A lot of it has to do with these additives being added here in the United States and not in other countries. And this is something, again, that I think is completely unethical. I think it's immoral that food companies can make their products safer and better for people and more natural for other countries, but not for our own American citizens, especially when they're American companies. What happened to America first, right? And this is something that, I mean, again, I am so hopeful because this issue is being talked about at the highest levels and has been brought to the national stage by Donald J. Trump and RFK Jr. And it's just been such a beautiful thing to see. I want to talk about some other chemicals that I think are really important too. There are a lot of emulsifiers being put in our food because they want the products to stay together and not break apart at the grocery store or to separate at the grocery store. So you'll find ingredients like carrageenan, gar gum, xanthan gum, locust bean gum, and you'll find this in creamers that you find at the grocery store. You'll find it in ice cream. You'll find it in yogurt. You'll find it in processed, all packaged goods all across the board. You'll find it in frozen foods, and it's a binding agent. But the problem is that when we consume it, and they found this in rat studies, it increases metabolic syndrome. It destroys their gut bacteria, and it turns on the receptor to store fat. And that's really an issue. And this is one of the reasons why I think it's so important to eat as much real food as possible. Because if you can prevent someone from like touching or like other than the farmer, right? Like if you can prevent the processing of your food as much as possible and eat as whole, real as possible, that is the best bet for the best health. And unfortunately and fortunately that we have the answers, but we have a system here in the United States where our marketplace is designed to kill us. We can't go to the airport without being inundated with these packaged processed foods that are full of these additives. We can't go to schools without them being served to children. We can't go to the movie theater and buy anything healthy. You have to buy a king size bag of candy. There's not even a smaller size for you to buy. We can't go to our fast food companies without eating 50 plus chemicals per meal. These are all man-made ingredients in the last 50 years that have been created not to improve our health, but to improve the bottom line of the food industry. And that's the piece where if all of our voices rose up and we all woke up tomorrow and decided, you know what, we're not going to eat this anymore. We're going to go to our farmers markets. We're going to go eat as real as possible. We're going to start growing our own food. I started growing my own food like really hardcore, I think, during the pandemic because we had a lot of time, right? We were at home. And it was like printing money. It was the most beautiful thing. Every time I went to go cut spinach and kale and fresh cilantro from my garden, I thought about the hundreds of dollars that I would save week after week of not buying these ingredients and trying to put them in my everyday smoothie that I was making, right? And it's absolutely incredible. And so there is a way to eat this way, but unfortunately our system is designed to kill us. And every single day when I have two small kids, they're 3 and 7. And when I was on the road with I had this big work trip where I was going around to different Sprouts around the country, Sprouts grocery stores, talking about and meeting people that buy True Vani protein and True Vani bars that I sell, and that I've created a company to sell products without toxins, labels, without lies, food with real ingredients. It's the cleanest protein powder on the market, cleanest bars on the market with ingredients you would find in your own kitchen, dates, almonds, maple syrup, things like that. And when I was going around the country to these different Sprouts grocery stores and meeting people out there, I was taking my kids with me. And it was great because I could go into the Sprouts and buy whatever I needed. But in order to travel through all of the different American airports, I refused to stop for fast food. And I refused to stop for, the snacks that are available at the Hudson News or whatever, right? I took the time to cut up fresh fruits and vegetables in my little hotel room at the hotel sink. And I brought my own knife with me and checked it in my luggage and asked for a cutting board, in room service so that I could just cut up all this stuff. And I made little boxes of hummus and veggies. And I made, peanut butter jelly sandwiches or peanut butter and banana sandwiches with, a nice loaf of sourdough bread that I picked up from Sprouts. This is what I had to do. And it was such a pain in the ass. Let me just tell you. While I was doing it, I didn't have a kitchen, but I'm trying to feed these little kids, these little growing bodies. And when I was doing it and I was rushing because of course we have to catch the next air flight, we have to rush to the airport. I got to pack up the children. I got to get them dressed and brush their teeth and, all the things you have to do as a parent. I thought about it and I said, this is my revolutionary act. This is how I'm fighting back against the system. And this is how I'm going to safeguard my children's health. And that's the commitment we need from every single American right now. Unfortunately, in order to like solve this issue, we need to sign petitions. We need to go to the headquarters of these companies and demand better, like I did with Kellogg's and taking 400,000 signatures to their headquarters on October 15th, and how they still are not listening, which is incredible because their brand is being decimated in the public. I mean, people are they're selling their cereals for $1 now that I see. They're trying to get rid of the product because no one's buying it. They're going to have to change. They're going to have to remove artificial food dyes in this new situation with this new awareness that we have. And, you know, you have to make that commitment every
right?
day. You have to vote with your dollars.
Kellogg's destroyed the American breakfast, right? Told us basically eat cornflakes, stop eating eggs, stop eating butter, stop having your normal farm to table breakfast, right? Eat our garbage cereal. People are always shocked that our kids have never had cereal. They're like, wait, your kids have never? They're American. How do they not have cereal? Because it's the worst thing
I
you
love
could
it.
possibly
I didn't
feed
know
them.
this about you.
Yeah, I mean, I always say it's the worst thing you can possibly feed your kids. I mean, it's the most horrible thing, and to kick off your day with that is just really, really troubling. So Kellogg's, it's your comeuppance. I'm not sad about it at all. But so many Americans. That brings me to the point I wanted to ask you here, Vani, which is about budget food. And Americans are struggling. You know, this is a very difficult time right now. Grocery prices up over 20% in many instances, and so these budget items, they masquerade as food, and then Americans try to fill up their shopping cart and try to get this Kraft macaroni and cheese or these other sort of garbage cereals and products, and they think they're feeding their children because they can't afford to. So that's got to be one of the biggest problems here. We talk about eating whole foods. You want to have steak, you want to have meat, you want to have eggs, but it seems like it's just so expensive, right? I mean, is that one of the main problems here as well for people? They just can't afford it.
I mean, honestly, I think that it has to do with education more than it's expensive. Because if you take the time to prepare and you meal plan and you buy the right ingredients, I think it can be very inexpensive. You know, one of my good friends wrote a book called, 100 Days of Real Food on a Budget. It's a fantastic book. And some of the meals in there are under $5 to feed a family of 4. I wrote a blog post, 75 different ways you can buy organic food on a budget. Because when I quit my job cold turkey, when I became the food babe, I that was the first thing that I thought of. Was like, I still want to be able to purchase organic food. How am I going to do this? And so I taught myself the skills on how to do that, using the bulk bins, using, different methodologies of how you shop at the grocery store, and how to look for the sales on some of the best foods that are out there, and what grocery stores to shop at versus others. And, starting to really meet your farmer so that you can get the best deal with them, being part of a CSA and a co-op so you can get fresh fruits and vegetables delivered to your door, or, picked up at a location that is going to be teeming with nutrients compared to what you find at some grocery stores that have been shipped from, halfway across the world. So, there are ways to do it, but I think it's about education. I also think it's about time. So it's time and education. It's the easy way out to open up a box of cereal. And right. what I do with my family, I think I do something that actually is less time than cereal. I'm making steel cut oats the night before in a crock pot that takes me 30 seconds to put in the crock pot. And I have a stainless steel crock pot, so it's super easy to clean in the morning. I literally just put it in the sink and rinse it and throw it in the dishwasher, right? And that steel cut oats, first thing in the morning, it's already made for my kids. They just literally put it in a bowl, top it with some fruit, some fresh ground flaxseed, and it's delicious, and they're like so satisfied. And that gives me some time in the morning to like get a cup of coffee and maybe make some bacon and eggs and other things for them, because they always want like a second or third course. Because I taught my kids from a very early age on how to on how to eat in courses, because I wanted them to eat at like longer meals with me out when I went to go eat in French restaurants. We love to go travel to France and to other French countries. And so speaking countries. And so it's like this, I just wanted them to know that. So they eat in courses. It's really cute. But that way I also make sure they eat their vegetables first, which is so cool because I always serve vegetables first. I know they're getting their vegetables and they learn to love vegetables that way because they're eating them when they're super hungry, not going straight for the bread or for the fun thing to eat right away. The other thing I want to mention is I wrote 2 books, Food Babe Kitchen and Food Babe Family. And these 2 books are half guidebook, half recipe. Both of them have 100 recipes each in them. And this is the guidebook on how to redo your pantry, what chemicals to remove from your home, how to buy the best products with specific brand swaps of your favorite products that you might have grown up having, but now is full of chemicals because you're reading the ingredient label, how to switch that out for something just as equally tasty that's going to serve your body better. I put together those books because I think it's so important to have the lifelong skills on how to get back in the kitchen and learn how to cook. I never knew how to cook. I stayed out of the kitchen for most of my life because I had 2 Indian parents and all they cared about was math and science. And they were like, you're not going to learn anything about how to do anything at the home. You're going to be learning math and science. And so I wasn't allowed to help my mother cook or do anything. And so when I was in my 20s, when I had that rock bottom moment, I had to teach myself how to cook for the first time. And I just used the Food Network and I learned on my own. I picked up good cookbooks and my cookbooks in particular are beginner cookbooks in a way because I wanted it to be so easy for myself, but easy for other people too, to spend less than 30 minutes making food for their family so that they could have real food on the table quickly. And, I have a huge business, True Vani. I'm running Food Babe. I'm an activist. I'm an author. I'm busy and I'm a mom of 2. And I don't want to spend all day in the kitchen. So I've figured out the ways to do that. And there's certain tools that I use, like that crock pot that I mentioned in these books too, that like is like my everyday thing that has saved my life in a way, because it's like, I know breakfast is going to be ready. And even if I'm tired or the kids were up all night and, we had a bad night or something happens, I know breakfast is ready. Like that's pretty awesome, right? To have that and I think that's the skills and the tips that American families need to have, because they need to know that there is another way. I don't have to just reach for the cereal box and give that to my kids. There's another way to do this. I can have fresh fruits and vegetables cut up the night before and already put in the fridge in their little special bowls or whatever that they can grab themselves. There's ways to do this. And I talk about all of those tricks and tips in my books.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is all about education, because if you're looking for the government to help you, to kind of guide you through your day with a fake food pyramid, you're going to be sorely disappointed right now. But I think it is about self-education, self-reliance. But I'm hopeful, like you, with these major changes coming with RFK Jr. and under President Trump, that the MAHA movement, making America healthy again, will actually take hold. So I'm going to have links to all of the things that you talked about, your books, your blog, all of those things in the description of today's episode. Where can people find you on X?
The Food Babe on all social media. Foodbabe.com. Yeah. That's right.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for the amazing work, and thank you for being a voice of reason up against these massive corporations which are trying to poison us. Thank you so much, Vani. I appreciate you joining us.
Yeah. Thank you, Clayton.